Good morning. Welcome you to Calvary Bible Chapel on this January 9th, beautiful Lord's Day morning. We're continuing on in our study of Revelation, light topic, sure. Revelation chapter 17. Last week we kind of focused on one of the first things that was mentioned about the woman here and what the name that was written, and we kind of focused a little bit on the word mystery and how mystery was the first aspect of this woman. How the woman is definitely not a physical woman. We know that, right? We know that Revelation starts with the revelation of Jesus Christ, so that's the purpose of Revelation, right? The revelation is not for you to know more about the future. That is not the purpose of Revelation. Revelation is for you to know more about Jesus. And that seems kind of a oversimplification, but so much in today's time, most of the things you look up about Revelation is to know the unknown, or to know what's coming forward, or to know the things that aren't revealed to you, or to understand the future. That is not the purpose of Revelation and never will be. It is the purpose for you to know more about Christ. And so I would encourage you and urge you that if you come across pretty much any piece of literature that is like, know what comes in the future, or understand the future, and this is what Revelation has for you, and I would urge you and implore you that is very dangerous thinking about Revelation. Revelation is not for you to know more about your future, it is to know more about God. And that's something that I'm stressing and continuing to stress, that if you're saved, you're not going to be there. So the fear of the unknown shouldn't affect you when it comes to Revelation. It shouldn't. So, trifling yourself, or trifling yourself, I guess is the correct term, with the minutiae of the things that seem hard to understand and the things that we've explained won't get you anywhere with Revelation. I don't need to understand what the grasshoppers mean. I don't. I need to know that they're going to be there, and I understand that they're going to be part, but that's just to kind of refocus on Revelation is not for you to know the future, it's to know more about God. And that's in the first verse of Revelation. That's not me extrapolating anything. That is the revelation of Jesus Christ. And then the second part of Revelation that it tells you is it's sent of an angel and sent and signified it. Right? That's still in the first couple verses, right? Remember we focused on that there is signs, there is metaphors, there is similes in Revelation. Revelation is not a pure literal book. And that's not a controversial statement. There is not a physical woman dressed in scarlet upon a physical beast. That it doesn't appear that way. This is descriptions. This is for you to understand. These are metaphors. This is what was revealed to John so that he could understand what was happening. Right? There are some very pointed and like this is what it looks like the signs, the wonders, the things that are very specific do happen. But when it says that they looked like grasshoppers and things like that, I don't think that's going to be a physical looking like grasshopper. Remember we said it's probably like the plagues and things of that nature, just the amount, or that they called them on themselves, or in the frogs, like this demons like frogs. Again, you have to look at it in that light of it's a metaphor in those regards. So when we're talking about this, and the great whore, or the woman that was upon the purple, it's not a physical woman. She doesn't have a name that is a female name. She has a name that is told to us, but it is an image of what it means. So let's go ahead and read chapter 17, because one of the best parts about chapter 17 is it explains itself at the end. It gives you what some of the things that are up in the air, and I'm going to put those in quotes, mean. So let's read chapter 17. It says, "And there came out of And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away into the spirit of the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of the abomination and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs, Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And we're going to stop right there real quick, and then we'll pass on. John got taken to, or got shown, a different aspect of what's going on in the end times. He said, I'm going to take you and I'm going to make you understand who this is, right? That's what the angel says in chapter 17, verse 1. He says, I will show thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. He's going to show who this is and what comes of her actions, right? And we've decided, and we know that the woman is the beast. She's Babylon. She's the world system. We know that more with verse 18, not to get ahead of ourselves, tells you who the woman is. And we see him, John said here in verse 6, and this is your view of it, right? So remember, one of the first things we talked about last week was the first thing written on her head is mystery. And a mystery requires discernment, right? You have to investigate a mystery. A mystery is something that is unknown to you unless you delve into the specifics, right? A mystery requires learning and proper context. And we see that John does not understand. That is given to us in verse 6, right? It says, And I saw a woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, and when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And then verse 7 says, And the angel said unto me, Wherefore did thou marvel? I will tell you the mystery, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. So, just to kind of bookend these couple verses, we see John see something he doesn't understand. And what he does is he kind of just sits there and wonders and ponders it. I'm going to ask you, what should have John done here? Did John do something wrong? And that's this is up for interpretation. This is up for personal things like this. Remember, John is a fallible view. John is an emotional man's view of the end times here. This is being revealed to him as a person. John is not an infallible, perfect witness to what's happening here. Remember, he's already made mistakes that we've seen in Revelation. He's already done things and wondered of who can release the scrolls, right? He's already asked in the early parts of, he starts crying out, and he already gets reprimanded a couple times saying, we know who this is. So my question to you real quick is, what did John not do in verse 6 that he should have done? At least in my opinion. Asked. I believe John should have asked. Because when faced with a mystery, and this is what's very interesting, when faced with the mystery, all he did was start to think about it instead of asked for discernment. And that could be its whole study in and of itself. But you see him get reprimanded here in verse 7. He says, Why did you marvel? Why did you just sit and ponder on these things? Why did you just think of it in your own head? He says, I will tell you the mystery. So where does the, for lack of a better term, revelation of the mystery come from? Anybody have an idea? Like, where does this, where does the explanation of the mystery arrive from? From a heavenly body, right? from a being outside of his understanding, from a source that was close to God. Right? One of the angels directly said, I'm going to show you, and then he says, and I'm going to explain to you. But the first thing he says is, you should have asked. Why are you marveling? It's a very interesting question. Why are you sitting here wondering instead of asking? Is kind of what I take that to mean. And you guys could probably take that a little bit differently. This is how I see this portion of Scripture, of this little interaction. Again, I am not the end-all be-all, for sure, of the interactions or the interpretations or the understandings of Revelation, for sure. But I find John's response here extremely human. Because he saw something he didn't understand, and he took what we would do in that situation, or what I would do. Maybe not you. He did what I would do in that situation. He sat there and went, wonder what that means. Which necessarily isn't the right thing when it comes to heavenly actions, when it comes to things that are happening on around you, of the worldview. The first thing that John should have done is say, God, show me what this means. God, reveal to me what this means. That should have been John's first response, instead of saying, hey, I wonder what this possibly could mean. I wonder what this is to us. Instead of sitting there and going, that's hard to understand. Which is something that I'm good at. It's just going, man, that's complicated. Good thing I don't have to deal with that. It's one of those things where the angel turns to him and goes, why are you even marveling at this? Why didn't you just ask me? And then he turns and now starts giving him the explanations of these things. He doesn't leave him in the dark. He doesn't leave him in limbo. He doesn't leave him in this misunderstanding of what had been asking to him, because he's revealing him these things. He knows John's heart's in the right place. He's just not asking the right questions. He's showing him how to approach the unknown. Another thing that has been a consistent, at least to me, and it may not be to you, but at least to me, Revelation has showed me that you interpret Scripture with Scripture. That has been, I think, one of the most important things that Revelation is teaching the new church, right? Historically, Revelation was one of the first widely distributed books to the churches. It is showing them how to interpret Scripture with Scripture. And he's continually hitting John with this idea of, why are you just marveling at it? Why aren't you asking for more? Why aren't you diving for more information? The information is there. It's why aren't you asking God, or asking why aren't you asking people with more discernment for the correct answers? Which I find a very interesting, back and forth here. And there could be a whole message on that, but we're not going to ponder too much into it. But I just wanted to bring that out to you. It's a very interesting pause between what happens, the vision that's given to him, and then the explanation of it. It's this little back and forth between him and the angel saying, why are you thinking about this? You're not going to understand it. Why didn't you ask for more? And that's something that I find extremely important, especially in my field of work. I see people who sit there and go, I don't really understand what's going on. I'm just why aren't you asking? You need to try to ask for more discernment. You need to ask for more information, or put things in place to give you more information so that you can understand the end results. John does what I so often do, of just sit on my laurels and look at it and go, well, that's a lot. And then just continues to ponder that's a lot, instead of saying, well, I'd like to understand what it means. So now the angel is going to go over this exposition of what each thing means and shows him what this means. Because in and of itself is not very clear, to be fair, right? It's not something that you'd look at and go, well, there's an angel on a beast. If you were to read the first 6 verses of Revelation in a vacuum, if those are the only things that you could read, I'm sure that God could give you these things. But in order to truly understand the context, you have to interpret Scripture with Scripture, right? If you read Revelation 17 in a vacuum, you would not get the full picture. Because interpretation of Scripture with Scripture is so important here. Because the beast has already shown up. Right? We know the importance, and we'll look a little bit more into the colors. We've seen a different woman here, right, as opposed to the one we've seen before that was represented Israel. So without taking proper context, this would stay a mystery. Without diving further into the book and looking into these things or even reading on, these things would stay a mystery, but now giving us discernment and continuing to dive into these things. And we've seen this beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns, and more of it's going to be explained here. But without the proper context and without the proper exposition, it would still be a mystery. Right? Without more Scripture about it, it would still be a mystery. But that's why we have more. That's why we have it. And I think this is a condemnation, a lot of times you could even take that, of people who take verses out of context and apply them singularly to other things. That's why we have the whole Bible and not just one verse about things a lot of times. There's pretty much no truth in Scripture, and this is, the Bible is true regardless in every verse, and that's not what I'm saying, but there's pretty much no truth in Scripture that's singularly taught. And it sounds kind of controversial, but there's usually more than one place to look up things and learn from them, because it wants you to go through the book. It wants you to compare itself with itself. It wants you to dive into it. It wants you to learn it front to back. That's what the Bible is meant to do. So them is now going to reveal to him a bunch of these things. We know that the waters are the people. It's going to just lay it out of who these things are. So I don't even have to explain it to you. It explains it to you itself with the verses. And I'm just going to go a little bit further, and then we'll stop to get to our prayer. But it says, in verse 8 we'll read, and it says, "The beast thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold that beast that was and is not and yet is." So my question to you is, what does that mean? What a beast that you sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. What is he revealing to you here in verse 8? There's a lot of verbiage that we don't normally use here, but it is actually pretty clear. So my challenge to you going forward, and we'll probably leave this until next week, is what does this mean? Or maybe 2 weeks, depending on what's going on. What does it mean that thou sawest and is not, and out of the bottomless pit? What is he giving you here that you didn't have before? And so that's I think a little hint as we go forth in the rest of the chapter. We'll compare to the previous verses as we go forth into the next couple chapters and things of that nature. We'll because it does get pretty clear here. It tells you what the horns are. It tells you who the woman is. It tells you what their meanings are, what their purpose is. It doesn't leave you in the dark. And then it pivots into chapter 18. But with that, I think we'll kind of think of just try to understand or try to research for yourself a little bit. What does he mean when he says sawest and was and is not and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition? And it's giving you insights. It's giving you images. It's giving you hints that makes you go to Scripture and understand it a little bit more. And with that, we'll go into our prayer service, so I don't forget it this week.